Before we begin, please note, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any affiliated organization. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. We encourage listeners to conduct their own research and consult with relevant professionals before making any business or career decisions. Enjoy the episode.
Good morning and welcome back to Coffee and Career Chats, Startup Edition. I'm your host Adel Hameed, you can call me Adel. Whether you're a startup leader, an aspiring founder, or someone looking to break into the startup world, you're exactly where you need to be. Today, we're diving into a topic that permanently reshaped how startups operate: remote work. We've passed the point of debating whether remote work is temporary. The question now is, how can startups use it to their advantage? Joining me today is Elizabeth Dominicci-Greer, the Chief Operating Officer of a company called EPHY. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, EPHY, or it's EPHY. I'll share the link to their website in the description below. And she's also an expert in building and scaling operations for tech startups, focusing on customer experience. Elizabeth brings over 15 years of leadership experience in scaling operations, developing high-performing teams, and enhancing customer success. She's led teams at companies like TriNet, driven transformation during crisis, and mentored leaders navigating startup challenges. Today we'll explore how startup leaders can build resilient, adaptable teams, reduce churn, and create operational excellence in a world where remote work is here to stay. So grab your favorite cup of coffee or tea and let's get into it. Before we bring Elizabeth on, let's take a step back and understand why this conversation is so important. Remote work is no longer an experiment. It's now a permanent fixture in how companies, especially startups, operate. But this shift isn't without complexities. Let's break down what the data is telling us. According to an HBR article titled "Remote Work Has Opened the Door to a New Approach to Hiring," remote work has expanded the talent pool beyond traditional boundaries. Startups can now access global talent, tap into specialized skills, and build agile teams without the burden of full-time headcount or hiring people on a full-time capacity. The open talent model is redefining how companies scale, making it easier to grow without overcommitting resources. When we're hiring, you end up paying taxes, you end up paying for medical insurance, all of these additional expenses. And if you're located in a major city, it's an expensive exercise to go through and an expensive burden to have. So when you're hiring people remotely, it's cheaper to have them working in less expensive cities where they can enjoy their lifestyle and they will appreciate the freedom that they have. So that's what this article is about. But it's not all smooth sailing. In another HBR article titled "Where Managers and Employees Disagree About Remote Work," we see fundamental disconnect. Employees feel more productive working remotely, many of them, and from personal experience, most employees, they like the flexibility. Very few of them, they like coming to the office on a full-time capacity, at least this is within my experience, but it seems that many of them like the idea of having a hybrid model, meeting up once a month, once every quarter. It depends on the culture and the team preference you have within your company. But within this article, it highlights that many managers remain skeptical, focusing more on visibility than outcome. This misalignment can slow down progress and weaken trust within teams. That's a very important perspective that we'll be discussing today as well with Elizabeth. On the executive side, a third article titled "Remote Work Isn't Going Away, and Executives Know It." It highlights that while some leaders are pushing for a return to the office, most recognize that hybrid models are the future. Interestingly, employees view remote work as being equivalent to an 8% pay raise when it comes to job satisfaction. For startups, offering remote flexibility isn't just a perk. it's a strategic advantage in attracting and retaining talent. So what does this mean for startups? You're a startup leader. What does it mean for you? It means that operational success now hinges on how leaders can balance flexibility with accountability. Startups must foster trust, enable autonomy, and still drive results. This requires a different kind of leadership, one that is adaptable, empathetic, and highly focused on outcomes, deliverables. Elizabeth has been at the forefront of this shift. Of course, going through COVID and the disruption we had in the industry, and she had to navigate through many challenges before and after that, turning them into opportunities. She built teams that thrive in hybrid environments and has helped organizations reduce customer churn by building resilient operational systems. And systems is the key word I like to highlight in these discussions. I'm excited to hear her insights on how leaders can adapt to this evolving landscape. Let's dive in. Thank you, Elizabeth, for making the time and appearing on the show. And we've met during a Stanford program called Emerging COO, and I enjoyed working with you. I've had the privilege of working with you, interacting with you, and seeing you in action and learning from you as well with your experience scaling up a company and building the operations of a company, building a scalable operation. So as I mentioned earlier in the email, the audience here, there are two types of them. There are some that are founders and probably they're early in their careers, and then there are others who are experts who come from the corporate world. They're looking to join a startup as startup leaders or
Okay.
scale-up leaders. So would love to learn more about your background, what got you into the area that you're in, why operations management, why COO, what advice do you have for the audience?
Yeah, well, first off, Adele, thank you for having me. It's just so nice to be here. And we met during our Stanford program called the Emerging COO. And that program put 50 people from across the world all together to talk through operations. And you asked me the question of why operations? Why am I so interested in it? First and foremost, I have an industrial engineering background. So I love making sure things are efficient, you have throughput, and you're able to streamline processes. With that background, I went into the systems engineering side, and I have done in my background things from working with big major corporations, being a management consultant with Accenture. I've done my own consulting firm and worked with startups and venture capital firms. And most recently, I've spent the past 9.5 years actually working in corporate America for companies that do HR, benefits, and payroll for small businesses, specifically in the US. And I left that about 4 months ago to go to a new startup that is focused on HR tech to be the COO there. And so I've got everything from that, like big corporate experience, being a consultant for big companies, consultant for little companies, and now being the COO of a tech startup. And so it's a pretty wide range. But what I have figured out in my journey, going back to the why operations, is that I work really well with somebody that is the COO, that is the more visionary, the more creative type. And then I'm able to execute that vision. And so for me, the COO position is the right one because it's the execution arm of the vision. I'm not the creative one to come up with the vision, but I can turn that vision into a reality and I can measure every KPI along the way to make sure it's not just a reality, but it's scalable and has longevity as well. So, that's a little bit about my background and why operations.
I'm curious as well. One of the things we had a discussion about this before is that there are startups that are based in Silicon Valley, and then there are startups that are not.
Yeah.
startups that are based in Silicon Valley, they have different dynamics, different resources, different expectations, different pace of
Agreed.
development, which is not necessarily good or bad. They each have their pros and cons.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you can touch on this, is your startup based in Silicon Valley now, or it's outside of
Yeah.
that?
So the word based is such an interesting concept because typically it means there's a headquarters or
Yeah,
there's a central location of most people, right? And so we have one of the three founders of the startup I'm with is located, he physically lives in Silicon Valley, but he's the only one. Everybody else is all over the world, quite literally. So one co-founder's in Amsterdam, another co-founder's in Seattle. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. We've got our developers in Mexico and in India and just all different places. And as we're looking to hire and to scale the company, we will be using a worldwide remote model. And there's different companies you can use to make sure that you're hiring the best talent, but for us that really is why we want to have the best talent. We don't want to be confined to the fact that everybody has to be driving distance to a certain building to come in and sit at a desk. In the post-COVID world that we all live in right now, there's so much technology. I mean, the fact that you and I, Adele, are doing this podcast and we are worlds apart, right? In very different time zones. It's nighttime for you, it's morning for me with my coffee, and we're able to do this. So technology is really enabled both having the right talent, but also being really efficient when you're a remote team. The thing that I have found, and I know we're going to get into this, is it takes very different leadership skills to manage a remote team, make sure you're building a culture. Because I've listened to some of your other podcasts, Adele, and you talk about that culture of a startup and having that culture get built. It takes a lot more intentionality when you're remote because you're not building culture in the olden days where you just put a ping pong table or video games in a physical office, or you didn't tie people to their desk by, not literally, but by like doing their laundry and bringing in food all day, where they just work and code all the time. Being remote, you have to have a lot more trust, and you actually have to really be intentional about how you're going to build that culture. So yeah.
You mentioned as well that the team are all scattered around the world.
Mhm.
So governing that again with the different time zones, what's the approach that you follow to make sure that you
Yeah.
hire the right people, everyone stays. It's not only when the team is small, it's you managing the team, but
Yeah.
as the team gets bigger, how
Yeah.
do you ensure as well that the new leaders, the emerging leaders, they follow the same approach?
Yeah, so I've done this a few times. So I took at my previous role, I had 400 people that reported into my organization, operations, service delivery to customers. And we started off US based prior to 2020. When the pandemic hit and COVID became a worldwide thing, we exited our building, sent everybody home, but everybody was still US based. And over the next 3-4 years, we started to globalize. So by the time I left that role, we ended up having folks in South America. We had folks in the Philippines. We had folks in India. We had folks in Poland. We had folks in various places. And we really had to change our culture. And a lot of it was through managing performance to metrics. So knowing your metrics, it wasn't just, hey, my manager sees me sitting at my desk, he knows I'm here. It really became, okay, here's the work that everybody has. Are you delivering it on time? Is it quality? And how fast are you able to get things done? And then how much volume can you handle? And it puts the onus on the person to get their work done. But then we also had to build, using technology, a lot of channels to be able to get answers. So knowledge management platforms became so key for us, because when we were in an office, folks could just stand up, walk to somebody else's desk and say, "Hey, I have a question. Can you help me answer this?" Well, when you're remote, you can't do that. So we actually had to build almost like chat rooms, if you will. If you think about Slack, Microsoft Teams, any of those areas, we had to build chat rooms and put an expert in a room or a virtual room, have folks know where to go to get answers, and then also started to get things out of people's heads. So we took what was kind of inherent knowledge that people just carried around in their head and started to get that out into documentation to build knowledge articles, knowledge portals. And fast forward now, we're at the very end of 2024 when we are talking, Adele. It'll probably be 25 by the time people hear this, right? And now we have AI. So not only did we have to write down knowledge articles and then people had to know how to find it, now you're going to have a world in which AI exists and you can find information faster, easier, which is going to make remote working more successful because you won't have to be searching for answers or looking around. The other thing I will say is that when you're building those remote teams and really building the culture, it's also really important you have certain, what I consider core hours. So that way everybody knows, hey, from like 10 to 11, this time zone, and it might be 7 or 8 o'clock your time zone. It might be different hours, but like for this 1 hour, no matter where you are, that's the hour that we all come together and do a quick stand-up meeting so that you can see each other. Because even when you're remote, what you don't want to be, you don't want to become anonymous. You don't want to become faceless. And so it's really important to still have that like touch point, whether it's just 15 minutes once a day, whether it's like for an hour once a week. It's really important to make sure that we humanize. And what it does when you humanize and when people are working in different locations, you get to learn about cultures. And what we found in my previous role and where I am today, you start to respect folks as human, and you start to break down barriers of, oh, well, you're this country or that country, or you have this politic or this religion. No, we are all working towards the common goal of this company. We're all human. We all wake up. We all go to sleep. Most people drink coffee or tea or some beverage, right? And we all have family. And so, like, reaching the commonalities has been really important for us as well.
You mentioned having to appear in meetings
Yeah.
and having them. Yeah, again, the closest thing to a physical meeting is a video meeting.
That's right. Yeah.
Especially here in the region as well, there are some cultural barriers where, for example, some people will take advantage of. Not, I don't need to be in front of the camera. I don't need to
Yeah.
be on
Yeah.
the call and video. How do you deal with? I don't know if it's the same over there,
It
and
is.
how do you deal with it?
It honestly, it is. It is the same here in the U.S. I've found it even in European countries and in South American countries as well. Because folks, right now you can see my office background,
Mm-mm,
right?
mm-mm.
I'm on a lot of video calls. I put up wallpaper, right?
Yeah.
A physical wallpaper. But for the most part, what we're trying to do is make sure folks feel like they can be themselves. And so what we really had to work at, this took a lot of work, was you can put up a custom, faux wallpaper, all those digital wallpapers, have it be your personality. But also, we had to really normalize the fact that Not everybody even had a desk. We had people sitting on the floor working at like a coffee table, making sure that everybody had, when we were remote, we were shipping desks and chairs all over the place just to make sure everybody in their home had a place to work was important. But then what we also did, and I even did this, I don't have it on today. We sent everybody baseball hats in the US at least. And, we would say, look, like, I don't care if your hair looks good. I don't care, what you look like. Put a baseball hat on your head. We want to see you and talk to you. And so that also started to normalize it. The other thing we did is we mailed sunglasses to everybody. And we would take digital photos of everybody on the screen wearing the same sunglasses. Somehow it made them feel like they belonged. And we'd had themes around our culture saying the future is bright, and it was bright, so you had to put on your sunglasses. Or we really tried to make sure, now that you see people from the shoulders up, like, we were not judging that, and we don't care what the background of your house looks like, just put a faux background on. So that we were trying to normalize the fact that everybody was equal. And fun fact about me, Adele, I'm 5 feet tall. You and I have never met in person. We've known each other for 3-4 years, and we've never met in person. I'm only 5 feet tall. I don't know what that translates to into the metric terms, but it's short. Let's just say I'm short. But what video chat and working remote does, it's normalized that you and I right now are the same height, right?
Yeah.
You and I have the same experience. So it's equalized things in a way that you might not have when you're in a physical office. When you're in a physical office, every culture has this. You judge based on appearance first.
True.
Then you judge based on intellect and speak, right? Or spoken word next.
How humans are, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just human nature. And so I'm a huge fan of remote working. I'm a huge fan of making sure that we can equalize and really be accepting of all. But you do have to be able to see each other, because otherwise you end up really like hiding behind stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, there are days I don't want to be on camera. There are probably days you don't want to be on camera. In various cultures, right? There's just different things people have going on. So that's why we really keep it to, okay, here's the 15-minute slot. The rest of your workday, keep your camera off, right? And so we have very specific rules. I'm not going to say rules, guidelines around it. Yeah.
Nice. This is really helpful. I like the idea of the sunglasses.
Yeah.
Because it helps when you start something new. So there is a level of excitement that's introduced to the whole routine, which lightens it up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, enabling people, it's like, you remember we had discussions where sometimes in meetings, you and I have to, on purpose, say something stupid.
Yes.
That people would lower their guards down and feel a bit more comfortable.
That's right.
Admitting to a mistake publicly and saying what we learned from it.
Yeah.
Now, having that same approach, I think I wasn't sure whether it would be applied to different cultures around the world, but since you're based in the US and now also you're experiencing people from Europe, from Mexico, from all of these different cultures.
Yeah.
Are there any other barriers that you're facing, like related to accountability, assigning tasks, men versus women, titles playing a role?
Yeah.
Are there any other things you discovered and you have these little tricks that you can share?
Yeah. So I will tell you this, when we started to globalize a few years ago in my role, we started to see cultural differences across geographies really come to light, right? And so we had to come up with different techniques to handle it. For example, showing up on time to a meeting is very culture specific. There are certain cultures where running 20, 30, 40 minutes late is okay, Or, there's just cultures where in certain geographies where we found where they didn't have consistent Wi-Fi access, right? And so we really had to like pay attention to, okay, what types of rules are we going to have to put in place, or tracking mechanisms are we going to have to put in place just for like punctuality, right? And then we really had to start questioning, does it matter? Right? Now, when you're on video and you're having a meeting, yes, it matters, right? Because you're being respectful of people's times. But in terms of getting tasks done or work completed, no, it doesn't matter. Just because previously we all had this notion of you showed up at work in the morning, you worked for 8-9 hours, and then you went home, doesn't mean that that's how it has to be. And so technology has really allowed us to start saying, okay, here's the volume of tasks we can give out per person, and then you just have to get it done in a 24-hour period. Right. And so if we have some folks that needed to like pick up kids at school, that had to take care of elderly parents during the day, and then they could do more work later at night. And that is cross cultural. Different countries we found culturally had different family relationships or family responsibilities. Right. And then you get the differences between men and women in different cultures as well, where maybe the woman, I'm even like this, wants to cook dinner. And so they've got to like have that very specific time frame, or they are putting the kids to bed, and then they can do a little bit more. And so giving that flexibility, we found enabled folks to actually be retained more. So as a leader, I've got a couple goals. I want my employees happy, and I want to keep them, because the cost of having them exit because they found another job because they were miserable, right? And then having to hire somebody new and train somebody new, and then get that new person acclimated to the team, and then the team gets acclimated to that cost is so much higher than just keeping the employees you have happy. I think that is the number one thing people get wrong in leadership. I think a lot of folks, especially in the startup world, Adele, I've seen this more and more, where in the startup world, we're just trying to produce a product, get it out to market, get people to buy it. We forget that we also have to take care of our staff,
True.
right? We have to take care of our employees. And if you don't take care of them, it'll actually cost you more money in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Every time you, uh, no matter how much we try to retain the information, the knowledge, there
Yeah.
is always a loss that takes place when someone leaves. And
Yeah.
also the time that's taken, especially if you have higher standards in hiring people
Yeah.
and finding the right people. You end up investing so much time in looking and scouting and interviewing. And when you bring them on board, so that's already like 3 to 6 months wasted.
Yep.
So you're absolutely right. And one other thing as well that now, since we're talking about hiring,
Sure.
what's your standard? How do you
Yeah.
make sure you've got the right people on board? Because I remember from our discussions, culture means a lot to you,
Yes. Yes.
and choosing the right people, keeping the right people
Yep.
is critical to that mission.
We'll see. We'll see if these resonate worldwide, but at least for me, when I'm hiring, there's a few differences culturally, right? So I always start with a very standard, um, like almost quiz that I want them to take, just to make sure you have the basic skills, right? I want to make sure you have basic skills, but then ultimately we're hiring a bit for personality. We're hiring for culture fit. And so we're also hiring for, are you able to work on your own, right? Without a ton of oversight. Now you're going to have a team. So we've formed like pods. And so that you're part of a pod so that there's belonging, right? and you're part of a smaller group, even though it's a larger organization. And then what we're also looking for is we're looking for, like, are you able to be flexible? Because that's the thing that I'm finding. Folks that come from larger corporations, and I don't know that this term will resonate with everybody, but it's a term I use, like very old school or old fashioned, where they just want to be told what to do. They almost want to be micromanaged. They don't know how to use technology, or to be flexible. That is a big, like, red flag. That's a no for us, because you have to be flexible, because especially at a startup or for a fast moving corporation, things are going to shift and evolve. Just because you're doing a job today and maybe your job is to be doing the financials, we may have you doing data analytics later. Both are numbers, both are using skill sets, right? We're not going to turn you from a financial person into a communications person, but if it's an adjacent role, as the company evolves, we're going to help you get training to continue to evolve with us. And so that flexibility is really key. The other reason flexibility is key when you have a global company or everybody is remote is that, believe it or not, climate change around the world is actually impacting various geographies more and more every year, is what we're finding. And so let's say we've got a few folks in the Philippines, they get a typhoon, right? So they're not able to work. We need the folks in Mexico to be able to take on that work. And so we actually are cross training globally. So that way, when a hurricane hits Florida in the US, somebody that is in Alaska or somebody that is in Canada can take on the work, right? And so having that cross training around the world is really important, because what we're finding is power outages are happening due to weather, floods are happening due to weather, various, wind or ice events are happening due to weather. And so we actually have to have backup plans, because we service customers 24/7 and we can't stop. And so we have to be able to shift responsibilities. And so flexibility is really, really key when we're hiring folks, so that they can not just interact with other folks, but they can take on other skill sets and jump in. But that's also why, like, our knowledge base becomes so important, because they might not know exactly what to do, but they can look it up in the knowledge base.
The other thing as well you mentioned on, I would maybe I'll call it startup readiness.
Mm.
Yeah. So some people are not startup ready, or a startup job
Yep.
doesn't fit them. So this is
That's
what
exactly what I'm talking
I'm
about,
driving.
is flexibility. Yeah.
Yeah. So if those same people that are process oriented, that want to just do the job and be micromanaged, probably would fit into
Yeah.
a larger organization where this is
Yep.
exactly what's expected out of them. Just follow the process. Don't think.
Yep.
Don't say anything. Again, both of them are choices. Both of them are could be great people at their jobs, could
Oh,
be very
absolutely.
successful at what they do. It's just that it's not the right fit for them.
Yeah.
So what you're describing is that these are people who want a bit of flexibility. They want to be creative. You're
Right.
giving them room to be creative,
Yep.
and show them as well how they can become successful,
Mm-hmm.
and, and how their work actually connects with the
Yeah.
within the bigger picture.
Yep.
So now this brings us, you were talking about customer service and delivering value.
Sure.
So AI and automation. How
Yes.
do you establish efficiency? Because you've done this multiple times. Now you're starting over, but it's a
It's a
time where
startup.
AI is picking up. So how are you planning your way forward with
Yeah.
AI?
It's you're right. I'm kind of starting over at this new tech startup. And believe it or not, it is an AI company. It's AI for HR, specifically the HR vertical. But we're going to be using AI along the way as well. And so part of the way we're going to be using AI is, for operational efficiency, which is how I want to look at things, because I want us to be scalable faster. I want us to be able to onboard new hires into our company faster, get them trained, but also onboard our customers to our software because we're a SaaS platform, onboard them faster because AI can actually walk them through step by step and do some of the training, right? And so making sure we're using AI, we don't have to hire a bunch of like learning and development folks or folks to build the training. Essentially, just using words, we can start building out training and use AI to fill it in. The other thing that we're doing is we're actually measuring, and I'm building out all these KPIs right now. I measure things 3 ways, right? And you probably know this being an ops person yourself, Adel, right? I measure volume, I measure the velocity, and then I measure the quality. And so you do both of those things, both how it is internally and externally. So if you think about quality, I'm going to ask our employees as we start hiring more and more, okay, what was their experience being brought in as a new hire, right? How's their experience 6 months from now? So normally as managers, you think about doing performance reviews of your employees. It's also really, really important as a leader, not a manager, a leader. You are getting feedback on what is the quality of your employee experience. And so we will measure that along the way, but then we also do the same for our customers, right? We've all heard net promoter score, customer satisfaction, customer effort score. We're going to measure all of those things to make sure the quality of the experience of our customers is top notch, both with our service providers, our people, and with our software, right? And so there'll be feedback loops that we're getting often to understand the quality, because that quality equals retention equals revenue, right? And we're a company, we want to make money, right? If there's a company out there that says you don't want to make money, well, you're not the type of company, Adele, you and I are in, right?
You owe it to your investors, at least, who
That's
trusted you
right.
with the
Yeah.
money. Yeah.
You owe it to your investors. So like having happy employees, satisfied customers, to me, you have to measure quality, both internal and external, so that you get retention and you get revenue. But going backwards, right? Quality is just one of the 3. We also have volume and velocity. So I'll go through velocity for a second. Velocity for me internally for employees is how quickly can we get them trained on new concepts? How often are we also retraining on concepts? How often are we introducing new concepts? How are we measuring that? Because I think of employees the way that we all go to school, right? You start up as a small child and maybe you're elementary or primary school. You grow, you have more knowledge, you move into your middle type schools. Then you move on to the universities and colleges, right? Once you have much more knowledge and you can get specific. I think about onboarding employees to my company the same way. They start off kind of in that primary role. Then they can, as they get more knowledge, we introduce more skills, and then they can become a subject matter expert, which is the university, right? And then they're also helping teach the new hires. But we have to build that loop. I'm not going to hire people in at the university level. Typically, because I want them to understand the culture, I want to hire people in at the ground floor and build. There's a lot of companies that have been successful at things like that. Think about like Starbucks, for example. Starbucks is a worldwide company that, people start off making coffee as a barista and then they can move up. Walmart is one that's very similar. There's a lot of success stories in that. And so that's what we're trying to build right now. And then when you think about velocity for customers, it's very, very different. Velocity for customers is how fast did you get them the answer to their question? If they had a problem with your software, how fast did you fix it? Right? How fast did you answer the phone? How fast did you respond to their chat? Do you have a bot that's responding to the chat? Right? Is it AI? How fast is it? And then the accuracy is part of a quality measure, right? How accurate is that response as well? So they want to know those things. And then in terms of volume, you've got volume internal and external, right? I don't want a ton of volume of people internally. I want volume of content, of information. And so volume for us, we're going to be measuring how many standard operating procedures can we get into our AI platform to deliver? How what's the volume of presentations that we can come up with so that we have all of our marketing materials. So we're going to think about volume for us from a service side and a SaaS side is artifacts of collateral, right? And making sure that we have all of our ducks in a row. And that's how we're going to measure deliverables, right? On our team. From a customer standpoint, volume is typically the number of times they're reaching out, right? A lot of times companies track it in terms of tickets or cases. How often are they interacting? What's that volume of interaction? Do you want them to interact a lot? Do you not? Those are things that you have to decide as a company, and then you measure to it to make sure you're hitting your goal.
Yeah, this also brings another question. How do we go into customer success and churn as well?
Sure.
Yeah, how do you make sure? What are the strategies that you advise startups to think of churn? Because most startups, they're so busy
Yep.
focusing on growth, but they don't think about customer churn.
Yeah.
What strategies and techniques?
Yeah. I think one of the fallacies of a startup is they truly believe every customer. Let me back up actually. Before they're even a customer, every prospect should become a customer, like 100%. And then every customer will be retained 100%. I live in a world of measuring things, of being operational, right? You've got to work with a standard deviation there. You really do. And you have to not get emotional or upset. I find too many startup owners get more emotionally invested. And if they don't hit 100%, they've failed. No, if you hit 90%, you're successful, right? And so making sure that you have your metrics measured that are realistic. You can't build these pie in the sky, like what I will call wishful metrics, and then get very emotional and upset when you don't hit them. Make them realistic and know when you have prospects, it's a numbers game. You're not going to get 100% of them. What are you going to be satisfied with? How many need to be in the funnel to be able to have your number come out of the funnel? Right? The same thing with customers. You're going to have some of them attrit, especially with where the world economy is headed to in 2025 and beyond. You're going to have companies that might be customers that are going to merge. They're going to be acquired by each other. You're going to have some that are going to go out of business. You're not going to be able to keep 100% of them. What number is it that you're satisfied with? And that's where like the operational metrics become really important. So for me, one of the best roles that I ever hire for is the person that's helping me with tracking all those analytics, right? Because that makes you a better decision maker and it takes the emotion out of where you're headed. You've got to hit the goal for your investors, and it's a numbers game.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You mentioned as well replicating the culture of Walmart and Starbucks, where people come in at an entry level, but then the
Yeah.
difference between a startup and those guys is because those companies are already established, they have some level of growth,
Yep.
and they're more of a corporate environment. However, in a startup environment, if I come in at an early stage, I have a better chance growing into middle management, even C level, within
Yep.
the coming 3 to 5 years, if
Yep.
I do the right things and I deliver results.
That's right.
So, what's your advice for someone that is joining a startup?
Yeah.
Number one, how can they be seen? How can they deliver results? How can they be recognized and their efforts can be recognized for a promotion and for
Yeah.
growth? And how can they remain relevant as the company grows? 5 years, 6 years.
It's a really good question, Adele. And let me make sure that I am very specific here. So while I'm operations, I come from a CX or customer experience background, building customer success teams, that customer support teams. So when I'm talking about entry level, it's on that CX side. I'm not the person hiring coders, developers, engineers, because for those roles, you do have to have some expertise already coming in, right? So I do want to make sure we're not mixing that up. But for the customer success side, the customer experience side, you do want somebody that has that flexibility, like I talked about before, and is able to grow with the company by jumping in where you need them, right? I don't know if you've heard the term like being able to roll up your sleeves and get into different items. We want those folks to be able to take on different roles. So you might start off in one place, but as you learn more skills, right, and get more into the company, oh, now you can go do this. Now you can go do that. Now we can plug you in over here. It might be temporary, it might be permanent, or it might be a career path. But for me, being flexible is really key, but also making sure as an individual, you are delivering your high quality deliverables on time. And for me, it doesn't matter if one person can do it in 2 hours and it takes you 20 hours. That I don't care about. What I care about is it high quality and on time. And then, figuring out along the way how you can do that. And then I would say at a startup, you have to be the type of person, if you want to stick around and move up, volunteer, jump in, take on more. Don't just sit back and only do what you're told. Because at a startup, we're all moving fast and we need folks that can recognize and think ahead. So that old adage of be proactive, not reactive, is what we're looking for. And that's how you can really get promoted. If you're the proactive one, if you end up being my go-to person, that I know you can get it done and you're flexible, but then you're starting to think about things before I do, you're the person I want to promote. So yeah, that's really important.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I think these are the main questions. There is actually, while you were talking, I've got one of the reviewers or one of the book reviews that I
All
had.
right.
Someone saying, you know what, joining a startup is overrated. I won't join a startup. I changed
Oh
my mind.
wow.
So this brings the question of who you think should avoid joining a startup.
Who should
They are in a corporate
avoid
job.
joining a startup?
Yeah. So maybe it's another spin.
Yeah, that is a spin. Honestly, this is going to be so simplistic. People that are not nice. Um, People that are in it for themselves, people that are selfish. Because part of being a startup, you're joining a team and you have to be a team player. If you want solo recognition all the time, if you are only in it for you or only in it for the money, then you're not there for the right reason. Like I'm a big believer, you want to join a startup because you believe in the mission, you believe in its purpose. I'm I'm at a company right now doing AI for HR because I understand the HR world. I'm a big geek. I love AI. I love data. This company combines things I'm passionate about. And I know we can help the customers. And so it's really important that you come in with a good attitude and you're just simply a nice person. Yeah.
If someone is not in the mood to pitch in, then
Right.
we're not judging people. It's not a bad thing to be in it for the money, clock in, clock out, and do the minimal effort.
That's right.
That could be a smart thing to do
Yeah.
for someone who is looking for retirement. They have a hobby. They want. So we're not judging them, but yeah, you're right. It has to be someone who's open to collaboration, to team play, being a team player.
Yeah.
I think we reached 45 minutes.
Okay.
So, but what we'll do, I've got just as a disclaimer for the audience as well.
Sure.
You're drinking coffee. I'm not drinking coffee. I'm drinking tea because it's
Yes.
night time here. But do you have any? Again, it's we're not coffee experts, but I have a certain level of love for coffee. So I
Yeah.
just wanted. I'm curious. Do you have any preference on your coffee or?
Yeah, I do. It's believe it or not, I actually have Hispanic roots and I love Cuban coffee. Believe it or not, it's just a darker bean and then you put some sweet like unsweetened or sweet condensed milk in it. And so it makes it creamy. So that's what I love. Yeah. But it comes from my dad's roots,
Mm.
coming from there.
And where can we learn more about that? I mean,
Oh
I've never
gosh,
tried Cuban coffee. I haven't. I
I
don't
will.
think they're even
You know
available
what?
in stores here.
I've just grown up with it, so I'll have to look and send you some links.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. And I think that's it. Do you have any comments? Any other advice? We were talking about fractional roles as well.
Yes, we
When-
were.
If you have any advice, because it seems it's a thing right now where startups, instead of hiring full time
Yeah.
CFOs, COOs, CMOs, they do fractional hiring.
Yeah.
What are the pitfalls of that? How can they maximize the hire, and what are the key success factors? Is it? I'm actually just thinking out loud. Is it like hiring someone that could be available based on deliverables, certain number of hours?
Mhm.
Do I need to ask them how many companies are you managing? Because there should be a certain
Yeah.
capacity that they are limited by.
Adele, I completely agree with you. There should be a capacity that they're limited by. So I've been a fractional COO before. Actually, about 10 years ago, I spent 18 months as a part time fractional COO for a food tour company. It was hospitality, tourism related. And in that 18 months, I went into the company, redid their operations. I kind of fired a lot of folks, rehired folks, set up all their procedures. My experience personally with it is that by the time I was finished, kind of revamping that company and doubled their revenue as well in that time, they then wanted a full-time COO. And so I ended up writing the job description and then helping to hire the full-time COO, kind of my replacement, but it was because I didn't want the job full-time as well. But it's really important when you're fractional to make sure. I've been both. I've hired fractional CFOs before, and I've been a fractional COO before. So on both sides, it's really important that you have good guardrails and agreements around the deliverables, the metrics and outcomes you're expected to hit, and the hours that you're available. What I have found with anything that's fractional, there's scope creep where it goes from, oh, you're going to help me 10 hours a week to now I'm asking you every question and it doesn't fit into that 10 hours a week. And that could be coming from the small business side, that could be coming from another side. And so making sure that you're committed to, if it is, I'm going to work for you this many hours a week, this many hours a month, that you really are committed to it, have guardrails around it. Or if you're just going to say, I will help your business hit this target, I will help your business hit this goal. Okay, then what's the time frame in which you're going to hit it? And what's the penalty if you don't? Right? Because there's got to be a flip side to it. Because there are going to be times that you don't hit it, either because you didn't do your job or there's external factors. The same way when we all get on an airplane for a flight, if the aircraft has a mechanical failure, okay, and the flight doesn't take off, it's their fault. But if the aircraft doesn't take off because of weather, that's an external factor. So you've got to really lay out what are the goals? How are you going to handle external circumstances? How are you going to handle controllable circumstances? All of that stuff needs to be defined up front, because otherwise you end up in disagreements along the way.
Identifying also a person who's genuine, who's not looking to prolong the contract. Like you mentioned, they wanted to hire a full-time COO.
Yeah.
Someone else would have just dragged that whole process to make sure that they continue getting paid for as long as possible,
Yes.
which is unethical, but also something that people tend to do to survive. Yeah, as a team, as a senior level, it doesn't have to be a CEO. Any kind of leadership role, could be head of customer success, could be whatever it is. It's just yeah. So thank you so much, Elizabeth,
Thanks
for
for
your
having me.
time, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure the team as well, or let's say the audience.
Sure.
Sorry, audience. I keep saying the team. Yeah, the audience have learned a lot, and yeah. So I think that's the end of it. There's nothing else. Any comments from your side? Anything that you want to end this episode with?
I don't know if you get feedback from your audience or your listeners, Adele, but I would love if anybody had feedback on the remote working as a startup and culture.
Yeah,
If they have other ideas, I'm always learning. So while I know what I've done, I know what's worked,
yeah,
I'm also always learning and I'm a
yeah.
constant learner. So I would love any feedback on that as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Would love. I'll make sure that as of now, I've been receiving minimal comments and feedback
Okay.
because this is the beginning.
Yeah.
But I'll make sure that whatever I learn and whatever I share, I'll be sharing with you as well.
Okay.
And hopefully next year, a year from today, maybe even less, would
Yeah.
love to have you again, either
Perfect.
on this show or on the Science Warriors.
It's so nice to see you. And I really love, and I said this, I really love the way technology operates, that like we can be doing something like this when
Yeah,
we are in two different countries and two different parts of the world. And for me, I think we're going to see a lot of respect of cultures
yeah,
start to form because of remote work. Like it
mm,
just makes folks more respectful and more understanding.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's becoming even. I mean, honestly, I wasn't expecting you to say that our team are fully scattered around the world
Mhm.
because usually companies within the US they hire people within the US.
Yeah.
They very
Oh,
unless it's an outsourcing center, it's a different story.
yeah.
But it seems that this is a trend that's
Mhm.
happening right now,
Yeah.
and this also will make it less important to relocate as well. As
Yeah.
long as you have an excellent internet connection, you're good. You
Yeah.
have consistent electricity.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I wanted to jump in. I got so excited. Because I think it's all about finding the right talent. Like what I'm finding, like some of our best data scientists
Mm,
are in other countries. They're not in the US. And so it's all about the talent, different universities around the world have different specialties. So, it's for me, it's not about the cheapest labor. It's about finding the right talent for the
yeah,
team
yeah,
and the right attitude and flexibility. And to be honest, me personally, I love to travel. And so I want a job where I can take my laptop and I can keep working, but I can be in different areas of the world as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So
The other thing as well, which I was touching on multiple times also in the book, is uh, Si- Silicon Valley, London, Shenzhen, all of these cities, they've got critical mass of talent.
they do.
So if you're a startup that's outside of those regions for any reason, for family reason, you're immediately at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I agree.
Investors, they want to invest in the best, most of them.
Yep.
So they created the critical mass in Silicon Valley and London
Yep.
and these good, high quality money, you know.
Yeah.
And then you've got the universities, the same thing. So it's the whole city is flourishing around that. Now, with this trend, it kind of is,
Yeah.
it's democratizing access to
Mhm.
resources,
It is.
including talent, including investment or smart money.
Yep.
So this is where I'm hoping that all of this shift will start working. There is a professor, his name is Professor Ilyas Strabilov. This is I mentioned this book to you before.
Oh, you have mentioned. I haven't
Yeah,
read it
yeah,
yet.
the
Yes,
venture
you mentioned
mindset.
it.
Just follow the professor. He has some numbers. I mentioned as well two of the graphs in the book,
Yeah.
and it was focused on what unicorns. Uh,
Yes.
Looking at the founders, which universities did they graduate from? Yeah, which cities
Yep.
did they come from? So all of that proves that
Yeah.
hypothesis, you know, that this is all uh,
Yep.
because of the critical mass in Silicon Valley and these places. This is why they can create these unicorns. It's not access to market because the market exists everywhere around the world.
Yep. It's not so that's why for me I do say like even hire and remote, it's talent. And
Yeah.
it's because like I can hire somebody that maybe went to Stanford but doesn't
Mm.
live in Silicon
Yeah.
Valley,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so the education is the backbone of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, we got sidetracked a bit, and this
We
wasn't
did, but
part
that's
of it.
okay.
But anyways, we could probably include it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the
Thank you for
time.
having me.
Thank you
Yeah.
for coming over the show, and yeah, we'll stay in touch, and we'll ask you to join us again in the future.
Okay. Yeah, that
Thank you
would
so
be
much.
perfect. And
Thank you.
have a great rest of your day. Or it's evening for you. Have a great
Evening
evening.
here, wherever
I'm
you
just
are in the world.
yeah.
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 To everyone tuning in, I hope today's conversation gave you practical insights into leading in today's evolving startup landscape. Remember, leadership isn't about controlling every detail. It's about empowering your teams, making decisive moves, and adapting when things change. If you found today's episode valuable, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with others who could benefit from this and find the insights interesting and useful. Let's keep the conversation going. I'll be sharing the links to the articles in the description of this episode. Make sure you go through them, you check them out. I'm sharing as well the LinkedIn profile of Elizabeth, so you can follow her and remain updated with what she's been working on. Until next time, keep leading, keep growing, and stay true to who you are.